Salam Sophie. Is it not working? Thank you. I should know as a radio producer, but I didn't. Thank you very much to Afghanistan and Central Asian Association for inviting me. As Claire said, I have just come back from Afghanistan and I have a heart full of things to say. So forgive me if I get emotional or if I get too panicky over small issues. But issues are very, very serious. You only have 2 or 3 months left to the elections, and things are spoken about quite a lot, but very little is done to change the actual scene. I mean, the previous speakers have spoken in detail about a lot of aspects of elections, but I will enumerate for you what I think are important aspects. It's not without reason that elections are considered as a very important element in any country when you want to use them as a yardstick, because it is very difficult to hold good elections. It's very difficult to have all the necessary criteria that make up good elections. And we know that the 2014 elections for Afghanistan are extremely important, because this could lead either to chaos and return of Taliban, or it could lead to a bridge towards better democratization and better situation for the people of Afghanistan who have suffered for over 30 years with wars and civilian casualties. So I think one of the first aspects that are important is that there are human rights obligations together with the promotion of transparency and accountability. And the Afghan institutions need to carry these to be able to hold proper elections. More importantly, you need a state which is capable of creating the necessary legal and technical framework for holding of the elections. Now, if we look at Afghanistan over the past 2 years, okay, I will just stay with the past 2 years where I have direct experience. If you look at the role of the state and the president, unfortunately we see that the president is not giving a particularly clear leadership messages or any new policy lines that will direct us to think, well, he is actually capable of holding his line on elections as well. If you examine most of his speeches, since I was doing communications, I had to read a lot of his speeches. Most of the speeches are really centered around 2 or 3 elements. One is to bash the foreigner, but it's often very unclear who this foreigner is and why he's being bashed, he or she, or it is being bashed. Sometimes it's the United States, sometimes it's Pakistan, sometimes it's Iran, sometimes it's the international community. It's just the foreigner. That's one element. The other element is that we are often hearing about having Taliban released from prison. He is often demanding release of the Taliban from prisons, which I think is kind of quite contrary to what a lot of people in Afghanistan want. Also, his relationship with the Taliban is not very clear for people, because sometimes he calls them his brothers, sometimes he calls them his enemy. And it is really a discussion that you hear quite regularly in Afghan media. Is he your brother or is he your enemy? This line is quite important because it also gives a background for the army and the security forces who are fighting. They need to have leadership on these aspects. Now, unfortunately, there have been quite a lot of releases of prisoners of Taliban, and about 300, according to reports, about 356 prisoners, Taliban prisoners who have been released have been direct requests from the president. And a lot of these are hardline Taliban who have come back and created a machinery of terrorism in Afghanistan. There have been, I mean, the most recent is about 72, but there have been several cases of demands for release of Taliban put through the international community, pressure whenever there's discussions about talks with the Taliban. So he always presses for release of Taliban. Of course, you see me getting emotional about this because as a woman, I feel that this is not going to do any good for Afghanistan or for women of Afghanistan. The release of Taliban is only detrimental to the state of the women of Afghanistan. And as a result of releasing all this machinery of terror, we have a huge number of civilian casualties. United Nations, UNAMA, used to mix the numbers, so we don't have, it's just casualties. But from 2007, we did separate the number of killed and injured. So only from 2007 up to 2013, you have 17,337 civilian casualties. And according to UNAMA again, about 80 to 85% of these are the responsibility of no other but the Taliban. I mean, United Nations doesn't refer to them as the Taliban, they are called anti-government forces. Anti-government forces are responsible for most of these. And most of the casualties are women and children. So to demand constantly the release of Taliban prisoners, I don't think is doing any good. And unfortunately, it hasn't done anything for progressing the actual talks with the Taliban. The Taliban are getting stronger every day. Don't let anyone fool you. They are getting stronger every day. They are creating havoc right across Afghanistan. There are reports of killing and maiming by the Taliban right across Afghanistan every single day. Okay, the east and south are suffering much more, but the rest of the country is also facing daily attacks. And look at the attacks right at the center of Kabul. There have been so many attacks in the past year alone. And I've witnessed several of those attacks myself. Only one last week killed about 4 UN people and 21, I mean, there's 21 killed, 4 of them were some of my colleagues in the United Nations. I mean, there's no difference between that and all the other casualties. I mean, I'm just naming them as my colleagues because I feel just as closely to all the people of Afghanistan for my culture, my background. So here we are facing a national army also that needs leadership. It is not getting it from the president because it doesn't know its enemy from its foe. It doesn't know its enemy from its friend. But at the same time, the army has been trained well. They are fighting back quite strongly. They are performing incredibly, but it's mainly due to the bravery of Afghans and the training that they've received. And it's not because they have had the suitable conditions that are necessary for a strong army, which includes leadership, which includes good finances, which includes budgeting for the army, which includes promotions for the soldiers and the commanders. These have been lacking. Also look at the security, NDS. NDS, I mean, Taliban have been targeting NDS directly over the past year. This is a message. If NDS in the capital, in Kabul, could be attacked so many times with its leader still in hospital and with a lot of its people killed, then they are saying that we are capable of disarming you. It shows that security is weak, reforms of security haven't happened, and also it shows, more importantly, that intelligence, there are serious lapses in intelligence. And this is causing more and more attacks and more success for the Taliban. And if you read the statements by the Taliban in their web pages, they have a very proactive communication set up, and they do woo in a lot of the international journalists who are very keen to go and interview them as if they are getting exclusive interviews, yes. But they are very powerful in their communication skills. Nevertheless, what they are actually doing is neither that they're trying to sell it in their communication skills as Islamic and in defense of Afghanistan. What they're doing is neither Islamic nor does it relate at all to the Afghan culture, nor does it relate to Afghanistan's well-known bravery. Bravery for Afghanistan, for Afghan men, is in protecting women and children, not killing and maiming them every day. Thank you. As far as the technical aspects of elections are concerned, it is true that UNDP, who's watching technical aspects very closely, as far as FIFA, which is the local election watchdog, as far as UNAMA, they have all come out and said the technical aspects of election are on track altogether. But I mean, technical aspects are not going to be enough because all of these organizations are wary of the fact that as far as women are concerned, facilities are not very good. As far as women's registration was concerned, these were lapses. As far as women making themselves candidates for the presidential and provincial council elections, these were not up to standard. And they are actually frightening a lot of women from taking part. There are also aspects that have been out in the news in the past few days about the fact that disabled people, for instance, there are not enough facilities for disabled people. What about all the Afghans who are living outside the country? They're not going to be able to vote. So you reduce a huge number of Afghans from taking part in the elections. Although, altogether, the technical aspects are said by the experts to be on track, but I think they're fragile. So we need to watch over them. But there have been also positive stories in Afghanistan, and I am very happy to be telling you about those as well. I think one of the most positive aspects has been the development of civil society, women's organizations, youth organizations, and political parties. And these different organizations have been working really hard under very, very difficult conditions. So they have built coalitions and groups that are working extremely well. Women's organizations and political parties, they have set up coalitions that are working well. Women are working from inside the parliament, women are working from all different aspects of civil society, coming on television, coming on radio, and expressing their concerns, which are very valid and a big cause for all of us for concern. Also, civil society is acting very strongly. But I do need to say one thing, and that is that they do have a lot of disagreements inside them. And these disagreements are often splitting them. They are splitting the messages that they are trying to give. Whereas I think in 2 or 3 months left to the elections, civil society needs to be out there every single day, making demands for their human rights, for their rights for elections, for transparency in elections. They need to be out there expressing what they need, what they think is important. They express it to international community, but they need to express it. They need to express it directly to their politicians. Women need to make it clear to politicians that they are only going to vote for men, for candidates who have good policies on women. We don't know who has what policies on women. And they need to make these points very clear through their women's organizations. This has been another success story. Media is a big success story in Afghanistan. Politicians are actually seriously frightened of the media because media really pulls them to pieces. But at the same time, journalists are in danger every single day, being threatened by the Taliban, by other groups, by warlords to toe their line. I've seen lots of letters that journalists have shown me that are direct threats to themselves, to their families, to their children. That if you don't toe my line, I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your son, I'm going to kill your daughter. And they do actually get involved in a lot of killings. There are daily reports coming from Afghan Journalist Association that talks about the killing and threats against the Taliban. Nevertheless, they have stood their ground and they are very powerful. Another very positive thing for the elections is the fact that international community is really behind Afghanistan. United Nations is behind Afghanistan. I've heard this in Security Council debates. I've heard it in taking part in United Nations meetings that happen for coordination of the work of international community in Afghanistan. UNAMA is working seriously on watching the elections, on discussing and debating with the political players to make sure that they are aware that UNAMA and United Nations are watching over them. But I must say, President Karzai causes problems even here. Not just President Karzai, it's the government. Because the United Nations, in fact, does not have the mandate to interfere in the elections. Listen to this, this is really important. The only thing United Nations can do is move if the government of Afghanistan requests it to move. Yeah? United Nations cannot do everything that you think it should do. Its mandate by Security Council tells it to do only what the government asks it to do. It cannot move off its own back. So it needs civil society, it needs political players to ask it to move. It cannot move on its own. And this is something that the government of Afghanistan has time and again said it wants to own and lead the Afghan elections. So when you say Afghan-owned and Afghan-led elections, it means foreigners stay out. And also President Karzai did quite a lot to take out the two observers which were supposed to be in the Electoral Complaints Commission. He positively tried to block them. He spoke about them in press conferences. He's basically trying to cut out any international interference. And United Nations cannot move if the government does not ask it to move. So don't blame the UN. But if civil society asks the UN, then UN can move. So use the powers that are at your disposal. Use the United Nations to make your points and be more active. I have a report. I'm sure all of you have the observers. FIFA has given out its report on the observation of elections, and also there is a huge list. If you Google Taliban prisoners, the number and the names of those who have been released and are charging the machinery of terror. I hope we can stop them. Thank you.
You laid out a lot of the challenges, but also gave us a rallying cry to unite in the 2 to 3 months that are left, both here in Afghanistan as civil society members. We do have 15 to 20 minutes for questions to the panel. If I can ask you to introduce yourself.